We are joined today by the wonderful Rosie Garthwaite, who is an award-winning British journalist and filmmaker. She traveled to Iraq soon after graduating from Oxford University, joining the independent newspaper, the Baghdad Bulletin, and contributing to media around the world. Currently based in the Middle East, she is a producer for the BBC and Mediadante, the production company which she co-founded. Thank you for joining us today, Rosie. Were you always interested in journalism?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I didn't know I wanted to be a journalist, but I knew that I liked to travel. I liked to read about travel, and I liked to read about other people, what was different and what was the same. I always found it intriguing how many similarities there were between people around the world, despite situations maybe being wildly different. So I'll give you an example. When I was in Iraq and I was on a train, and it was a 36-hour train ride. It was going so slowly that people could put coffins onto the train. They could run up and put coffins onto the train because it was moving that slowly that they were able to get to, because there was a place they wanted to bury their dead along the train line. And this train was going on forever. I didn't realize it was going to take so long. I only had like enough water for one day, and it took like 3 days or 2 days. And so I ended up making extremely close friends with this family there. And even though it was one father with 8 women that he was in charge of, his children, and his sister and his wife, somehow we had a lot in common. Like, we could talk, you know, and even though he had a double bed and we all slept on the floor around him, he was total poverty. The only thing he had was a fridge, and the fridge wasn't really working. It was more like a store. But we had plenty to talk about.
You traveled to Iraq in 2003, right after graduating from university, and without doing the hostile environment training. What was that like?
Yeah, it was probably pretty stupid. I'm very surprised that my parents let me go. They told me later that they didn't sleep for 6 months, and I understand that. I also am surprised that the organisations I work with, who've now changed very dramatically since that time, so they now have very good security. But at the time, I was 22, I had 0 experience, and they were hiring me in a very dangerous place to do quite dangerous work, and without questioning like whether that would be a good idea for them. But in those days, journalists weren't getting killed in so often, and so. But now, unfortunately, it happens a lot more. It's a very dangerous time for journalists at the moment.
During your time in Iraq, what was it that left the biggest impact on you?
I think there were so many things. I had, at the very end, a very strange experience where I got into a taxi, because I used to travel by taxi with my translator usually, but sometimes alone. I got into a taxi and the guy was like, "I know where you live." And he drove me straight to my house. And I thought, okay, that's weird. And then I had 2 or 3 incidences over the next 2-3 days where people came and warned me that there was somebody about to come and attack in that place. So one of them was an internet cafe that I used regularly. And I was pretty much, I think, one of the only Westerners there who wasn't a missionary. There were some missionaries, but I was the only journalist. And then there were a couple of other locations where I was warned by phone or by somebody physically telling me that somebody was going to come and attack in that location, and then that attack would happen. And then I realized probably my time is a little bit, I need to go right now, because clearly they know where I am. And unfortunately, very shortly afterwards, a colleague of mine went down there to Basra, and he was kidnapped because, you know, they were looking out for Westerners at that time.
What were some of the most valuable things you learned?
Gosh, so many things. I mean, the most important thing is to listen to the people around you. So a lawyer in London, a very experienced journalist who's running the Baghdad bureau for Reuters or the BBC. They're very good. They're very good at giving advice, but ultimately you have to leave the people that you're working with behind when you go. You have to do what they want you to do, mainly so that they can continue to live safely. And so that's really important.
You spent years based in and reporting on stories in the Middle East. What is the appeal to you of that region?
I don't know. It was perhaps every generation of journalists has a war. Like before me, it would have been the Balkans, and my generation is very much all about 9/11 and the aftermath of 9/11. And now, there's the Arab Spring as the new generation. But and probably Brexit and Trump, to be honest, they're probably just as big. But I also was in the army when I was 18. And so when the build up to the war was happening in Iraq, I was getting messages from friends of mine saying, listen, we're already in Baghdad. There's no debate. There's no point marching. We're already going to war. We're here. And so for me, I was really intrigued and curious to know why it was that the government could say one thing and then on the other hand, there was another reality on the ground. And so I wanted to explore that and find out why.
We wanted to ask about the Workers' Cup, a documentary you produced about migrant laborers building infrastructure for the Qatar's 2022 World Cup. It's obviously a sensitive topic in a country without much in the way of media freedom. How were you able to get so much access?
Well, inside Qatar, there are people, Qataris and Westerners, who are in high up positions. And mainly it's the Qataris, though, who want to see some change. They know that change is needed, but they're really up against it. Like there's no mechanism to force change. It really has to be firstly a cultural change and a desire to see the conditions of workers improved, but also it has to be a top-down imposition through checks and balances. So those people I became friends with over many years. And so when the opportunity came up to follow a group of workers through a FIFA-related tournament, I mean, the people who ran the tournament were the same people who are now setting up the World Cup for 2022, the next World Cup. So those people wanted to have journalists covering this Workers' Cup. And so they invited journalists to come. So we were partly invited for that reason. But then the continued access we had was given really because I think we were a trusted pair of hands when it came to telling the story of the workers. We'd done maybe up to 30 news and documentaries about the workers for many different other organisations before that. So, yeah.
We have been hearing about the terrible conditions in Qatar in preparation for the 2022 World Cup. Do you think that the conditions have improved ever since the beginning?
It's definitely improved since the world started calling for change. I would say that Qatar is probably now going ahead of the rest of the Gulf. The Qatar. We are all interested in what Qatar's migrant worker situation is about, but we're mainly interested in that because of the World Cup. When I was trying to pitch the story before it got the World Cup, nobody was interested. But the migrant worker abuse story is something that is true across the Gulf, across the Middle East, and across the world. I mean, since I've taken the film out around the world, people in England have told me, oh, well, there is a similar situation in places in England here. People in the US have told me about their migrant worker situation. So I think it's a common tale for outsiders coming to do menial work in foreign countries. But since the eyes of the world have been on Qatar, they definitely have improved. But I would say there's a bit of a two-tier system going on right now, where everybody's interested in the people who are building the World Cup, and definitely their standards have improved a lot. But then there's like thousands of other companies who aren't building stuff for the World Cup, and I would say that the attention to them has actually probably reduced over the last 5 to 10 years, because everybody is just looking at what the journalists are interested in and where the attention is, which is on those companies, those small number of companies building the World Cup.
You filmed the documentary for approximately 4 years. Did you ever feel demotivated?
Oh yeah, we had a team of 3 kind of main people on this project: the director Adam Sobel, the producer Ramsey Haddad. Those guys were in the camp with the men. I couldn't be there. And then I was another producer. My job was about access and about funding. So all the time, one of us was going to be demotivated. Mainly we were demotivated because we had no money, but also it was we were finding it really hard to find people interested in the subject. But slowly we built our team. slowly we, found supporters, and we kept confidence in ourselves. I think only because we were such a close team, and we were so passionate about the subject. If the subject had mattered less to us, then we would have probably given up sooner.
I think it's safe to say journalism has changed a lot over the years, like the rise of social media or large news outlets cutting down their foreign bureau. What kinds of changes have you seen in journalism, specifically in foreign correspondence, since the start of your career?
Well, on the one hand, things have got better. People now realise they have to employ people more formally. They have to give them insurance. They have to give them training. So that's the good news. On the other hand, informally, we're still extremely reliant on UGC, user-generated content. More prevalent than ever. Everybody's got a phone, and most of the Syrian war has been told through user-generated content. Then the biggest problem for us is making sure that things are correct. How do we verify something when we've never met that person and they're in a foreign place, and maybe they've sent it, if they send it via social media, sometimes it wipes some of the data from the video, and we can't actually check where it was filmed, when it was filmed. It makes it really, really difficult. But I do believe that overall, people have the ability to tell the stories that are going on around them more than ever before, and that's got to be a good thing. But I think what it's led to is a clampdown by governments on the freedoms of journalists. So you're seeing, I think, the last year, I believe, was one of the worst years ever for journalists being incarcerated for their work. So it's not good.
What does journalism need to do to adapt to continue delivering to the public high-quality reporting and telling important stories?
Well, I think our biggest challenge is fake news. So, we are up against an attention deficit disorder of a global scale. How do we get people's attention onto things that are real and not unreal? How do we get them to engage and not just like and pass on? And that problem is yet to be solved, I think. I mean, obviously it's about good storytelling, but I worry that we're going to end up, algorithms will end up filtering what we hear about and don't hear about. And I just hope that we can find a way to combat that, force people to see the other side, the other opinion, in some way that has not yet been developed.
Thank you very much for inspiring all of us and for taking your time to join us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very much.